What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. This one is taking a look at some of the common mistakes that I see beginners making when it comes to keeping Acropora. So number one is getting into Acropora too early. So I get asked all the time, Abe, how early can I put Acropora in my new tank? Or people are just asking me if they are ready for Acropora. In general, I would say a good rule to go by is that you should follow along the progression of soft corals to LPS to easy to keep SPS such as Montes, bird's nest and stylos. But once you can keep those, color them up and grow them, then I would say you are probably ready for Acropora. So something else that I see beginners doing is not having their parameters in check before getting their Acropora. I see it all the time on the boards. People are posting up like, yo, I'm having trouble with my acros, they're dying or they're browning out. And when they post their parameters, like, at least one or two of those parameters are like out of whack. And of course I don't say it, but because I don't want to be mean, but I'm thinking in my head is like, why are we dealing with this now? You know what I mean? You really have to have all that stuff in check before you buy Acropora. It's really going to save you time, money, and just trouble. So alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, salinity, temperature, phosphate, and nitrate, have all that stuff down. Have it all stable a couple months beforehand. You can't just like do 100% water change, check the water and be like, yo, I'm ready for acros. Like, no, it has to be stable, you know what I mean? But once you get that done, you are ready to move on to getting some acros. So number three is buying expensive or so-called high-end Acropora too early. Look, obviously it's your money, do what you want, but I do think it is a mistake to buy some of that higher end stuff in the beginning, because truth be told, whether you think high-end is like, some just kind of bullshit or not, let's be real. Some of those higher end, more expensive pieces are a little more difficult. If not difficult to take care of, they're a little more difficult to pull out all of those colors. So you should really be starting with things like Strawberry Shortcake, Pink Lemonade, Oregon Tort, Red Planet, Garf Bonsai. Look, these are all nice corals to me. As long as they're healthy, a lot of corals look really nice, especially when it goes out to colony size. So start with those. A good indicator that, to me, that says that you're ready to move on to more expensive stuff is when you can like color up pieces. Like you acquire a piece, it doesn't look that great, and over time it starts to look better in your system. It starts to grow and starts to look better. That's a good indicator that you're doing stuff right, that you're probably ready for some higher end, more expensive pieces. I like to think of it this way, is like when you first get your driver's license, it would be kind of stupid for you to be driving around a brand new Mercedes, because you're most likely gonna f*** it up. So number four is getting fooled by these over-the-top, overly manipulated photos, as well as buying a coral just based on some kind of catchy vendor name attached to it. Even though the piece looks quite average, just paying top price just for that stinking name. So this is a pretty huge topic, and eventually I'd like to get around to making a video about it. But until then, let me leave you with a couple of rules that I like to live by. Number one, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? That goes with anything in life. A red flag really has to go up if it just looks too awesome. The second rule that I like to live by is that you should be buying a frag based upon what the actual colony looks like, not necessarily what the frag looks like, right? Because it's like this, yeah, you're buying a frag, but essentially you're buying a seed to that colony. You know what I'm saying? So look at the colony, and it should be a big colony, not like a frag with a couple of branches off of it, because people call that a colony these days. Yeah, but look at a branch of a big colony, and that's the best indication of what you are actually buying, in my opinion. Because frags, they do weird stuff. And I know because I sell corals online. So I would frag something and I put on a frag plug, and it starts to develop weird colors. First of all, it often loses some of its colors, but then you have some that just develop these weird colors. The edge where it's encrusting starts to change colors. Like, none of that is real. That's all transient. So to make a buying decision based upon just what a frag looks like without seeing a colony, to me, is a huge mistake. So the third thing that I do when I buy corals is that I do a Google search. That's the good thing about some of these name corals, that you can do a Google search, and my goal there is to find a hobbyist picture of that same piece, right? Because the vendor piece usually looks awesome, right? You know, they know how to take pictures, and that's where the hobbyist picture comes handy, because you can almost average the two pictures to get a good idea in your mind of what this piece is probably going to look like, right? And you know, you can determine whether that piece is worth the cash that they're asking for it. So that's a good thing to do too. Okay, so number 5 is not giving your acros enough light. You know, I think lighting is so important. It's so important to me that I've made 3 separate videos on lighting, and I made 0 videos on flow. So that tells you how important I think lighting is. But you know, first I should say that I really appreciate the research that is going on in the area, you know, that says that the best par for Acropora is 250 to 350. You know, I guess that's where you get the best growth. Like I said, I appreciate it and I respect them. Thank you so much. Good job. But in my experience, that to me is the bare minimum. Obviously, there are going to be Acropora that do well in that range, but then again, you have a lot of acros that do well higher than that par. And I guess my point is that, yeah, you should definitely have that par level in your tank, but then you should also have higher par available in your tank as well for some of the pieces that, for some of the species that prefer higher light, and for some of those pieces that actually color up better in stronger light. So, and let me just say too that I can think of 7 local reefers here in the San Diego area who have nice Acropora dominated tanks. Like, none of these guys are shooting for 250 to 350 par. Like, I don't know their par exactly, but their tanks are just covered in light, just like how my tanks are. Like, nobody here is aiming for that 250 to 350. It's better, in my opinion, to be higher than 250 to 350. You just got to have that option. To shoot for that, in my opinion, is a mistake. So one more thing that I want to say about lighting is Photoperiod. I do run across those folks who are, you know, trying to hug a tree and all that, and trying to run like 8-hour photoperiods. Like, that is a mistake. These corals come from the part of the world where, you know, half of the day is being lit by the sun. I'm not saying that it needs to be intense light for the entire 12 hours, but just give them enough light. Like, for me, I have my lights on for 12 hours total. 6 hours of that is intense, and you really shouldn't be trying to, you know, cut corners when it comes to lighting, is all I'm trying to say. There are folks who run metal halides, and if they run metal halides solely, they only have them on for 8 hours a day. That's kind of a different story. Obviously, those lights are very strong, and you know, that obviously there's going to be some variance. I'm just saying, don't skimp on light. Acropora and this hobby in general is not the hobby you want to get into if you're trying to save the world and try to reduce your carbon footprint. Okay, so number 6 is all about being patient. Look, it just takes a while for some of these corals to grow. If you want to get an idea of what average Acropora growth looks like, check out my last video. But I want to say one more thing about patience, and it's this, is that you can only be comfortably patient if you have a solid setup and you're staying on top of your husbandry. Because the opposite is not true. Is like, if you have, you know, cheap old equipment and you've been cutting corners and you're doing the bare minimum, then you can't really afford to be patient. You're not going to be comfortable being patient, is what I'm trying to say. Is because when things aren't going how you want them to go, like, you know, they're not growing fast or they have poor color, you're going to be questioning your cheap ass equipment. You're going to be questioning the fact that you haven't been staying on top of keeping your elk stable, you know, things like that. So what I'm trying to say is that patience is a part of the hobby, and it's almost a luxury that you can afford if you're doing things right in the first place. If you're not doing things right in the first place, if you're taking shortcuts, then you know, that time where you should be being patient is going to be a time where you want to pull your hair out. Okay, so number 7 is not spending the extra money to buy aquaculture frags. So in general, there's 2 types of frags out there, right? Or 2 types of corals that you can buy. Stuff that has been circulating around in the aquarium hobby for several generations, and then there are corals that are like closely removed from the ocean, like maricultured and wild stuff, right? So often the maricultured and wild stuff are much cheaper. You know, you have chop shops, folks who just buy these maricultured colonies, cut them up into frags and sell them for cheap, right? So I'm telling you right now that even though those are cheaper, it's better to buy aquaculture stuff because they do a lot better. But let me just tell you my experience with mariculture stuff, and that'll give you an idea of what is actually happening. So say I bought 10 mariculture stuff, right? This is kind of from experience. About 1 out of those 10 is pretty much just going to croak, not going to even make it, hates our aquarium water, just going to straight up die, right? So about 3 of those in my experience will either brown out or have really crappy color. Pretty much I want to throw them in the trash, right? And then about 5 of the remaining 6, maybe about 5 of them, maybe 4, but 5 or 4 of them would just have decent colors, nothing spectacular, pretty much look okay, right? And then maybe 1, probably 1, to be honest with you, 1 of them will look really good, really happy that you bought it, but again, that's 1 out of 10. So going by those statistics, you should be willing to pay 10 times more. I'm not saying that you should, but going by those statistics, you should be willing to pay 10 times more for an aquaculture frag, because number 1, it's used to our aquarium water. Number 2, it's more likely to keep its color, let alone stay alive, and just number 3, it's just more likely to thrive. So even though those maricultured pieces are cheaper, in my opinion, as a beginning hobbyist or a beginning Acropora keeper, you should really stay away from those. And obviously I've tried them and I will still try them once in a while, but it's only because once in a while I come out with a gem. But for you to do it as a beginning Acropora keeper, stay away from it, in my opinion. Okay, so number 8 is all about taking advice from the right people. In general, you should be taking advice from folks who have nice aquariums. The good thing about the internet is all the information out there, but to go along with that is there's a fair amount of bad information out there too. Or there are folks who would just regurgitate information that they have read, but they really don't have the experience to back it up. So in general, put more weight on on information from folks who have nicer tanks. So the second thing I want to say about the advice is that you should try to take advice from someone, or you should follow someone who has a tank that is similar to yours. Like if you had a Red Sea Reefer 250, it's about 55 to 58 gallons, right? You shouldn't be following exactly what Sanjay Joshi does in his 500 gallon tank that's been running for like probably over 10 years now. I mean, don't get me wrong, Sanjay is an awesome dude to get advice from, but to follow exactly what he's doing in that big old established tank in your little Red Sea Reefer 250, in my opinion, is a mistake. Not only because they're totally different tanks, but in my opinion, people with larger tanks can get away with a lot more than us people with smaller tanks. So something to keep in mind. The last thing I want to say about advice is that you shouldn't be taking piecemeal advice from all these different reefers and synthesizing that into your own little theory. In general, you should, if you're going to follow what somebody else is doing, you should pretty much go all in. Let me just give you an example. So I run my phosphate pretty low, and pretend you liked how my tank looks and you want to duplicate it. You shouldn't be just say, oh, Abe is running raw phos and he likes to keep his phosphates very low and I'm going to do that, but at the same time not follow what he does as far as feeding, because I'm a kind of heavy import, heavy export kind of guy. So if you're keeping your phosphate that low and you're only dropping in like a pinch of flakes a day, that's terrible. I mean, that's not the whole picture is what I'm trying to say. And that's probably the reason why a lot of people say, oh, when I run GFO, my corals look like they're starving or they're fading or they'll die. First of all, I've never had that experience, but I believe them fine. But do you know what I mean? You have to take it in sort of the whole big picture is like heavy import, heavy export. Just make sure you're seeing the whole picture. Just don't piecemeal things together and think that it's going to work. But at the end of the day, what I realized, back in 2008 when I first started being really successful with Acropora is message boards and YouTube, that's all going to be great. But at the same time, you are really going to have to figure out what works for you. Well, all right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for making it this far. As always, until next time, boom, I'm out.